All right, so we are out here on the beach, my toes in the sand. We are set up for a twilight. Now this is gonna be a rather ambitious shot. I'm about a good half mile, 3/4 of a mile away from the hotel. The reason we're so far away is that I wanna get some of that shoreline. I wanna place this hotel in this amazing environment. As you can see, we have this huge mountain right behind the hotel. We have this really cool shoreline and we have quintessential Hawaiian palm trees, and I wanna capture all of that. Again, I wanna do a job of putting this hotel in a place, giving it a sense of place and a sense of environment. In the twilight shot, this is one of our absolute money shots. So in order to prepare for this, I came out here yesterday for a couple hours and scouted. And today I came out here 3 hours before sunset to scout some more because there's so much ground that we have to cover. Along this whole strand of beach here was probably about a mile of ground that we can cover where there's a potential for a picture. So I've settled on what I think is the best possible spot. The camera is set up and locked down. I'm waiting for the sun to get far enough behind the horizon so that the sky gets dark enough so that the brightness of the sky is equal to the brightness created by the buildings and the artificial light. And when the brightness of the sky is equal to the brightness of the hotel, that'll be our magic blue hour. We'll get a beautiful twilight shot. After that, I'm gonna have Adam, my assistant, who is about half a mile away on a walkie-talkie. I've got him using a Profoto B1. I'm gonna communicate to him and we're gonna add some flash pops to this building and light it up and make it look really pretty. Now you may be wondering, how in the world am I gonna trigger flash across 2 miles, a mile, however far away we are, and get it to fire consistently? And the answer is, I'm gonna stop down a little bit and I'm gonna try to get a 2, 3, 4 second exposure. I'm gonna tell him on the walkie-talkie, the shutter is opening now. He'll have 2 seconds to manually pop the flash and light up that building. Now, because there's so much ground for that flash to cover, I'm gonna open that aperture up, let a lot of light in from the flash, bump the ISO, and be sure that I get a lot of coverage from that light all over the side of the hotel. So I've been out here with the camera just bracketing for about a half an hour, trying to get the colors in the sunset, some colors in the water. But as you can see, there's still really no light coming from that hotel. It's got to get a whole lot darker. The end goal is here for me to combine this beautiful sunset sky with some nice sunset water. We're going to add our light to the hotel and we're going to make it come to life. We're going to make it look a little bit alive. So I'm set up in a bit of a strange location. Like I said, I'm about a half mile away from the hotel. The camera's perched on some rocks over there, and the reason for that is, to the right of the camera, there's a really cool spit. Now it follows the coastline, and on the end of that spit are a few palm trees. Those are gonna frame the hotel nicely. The reason I'm so far away is those rocks are a little bit dangerous. I don't wanna be scampering over those in darkness. I've got my camera ranger set up so I can remotely see exactly what I'm doing. I can work in the comfort of this beautiful water here, and it's, on the whole, a relaxing experience. Right here, I've got my walkie-talkie. I'm gonna be talking to Adam with this. He's gonna be adding the light appropriately. So right now we've got some clouds coming over this mountain. I think I got out here early enough so that I'll get a nice clear mountain line, but if not, I hope we'll be able to work with that because that was one of these key features of this shot. Other than that, we're just really waiting for it to get dark enough so that the flash has enough power to light up the whole side of the building. If I try right now, there's still a bit too much sunlight and that flash wouldn't reach the top of the building. So it's got to get darker. The flash has to be able to penetrate through that sun a bit better, cut through, and once it's dark enough, we're going to get some nice flash pops, light up the side of the building, add a bit of life to it. Everything else around, I think I'm going to keep it a little bit dark, a little bit moody. I want to give the feel that this hotel is kind of secluded, off the beaten path, and I think by letting it this way we'll do it. In order to ensure even coverage of the building with our flash, I want to feather it. So if this is the wall of the building, I don't want to aim the flash like this. I want to aim it straight up. That way the intensity of the light at the bottom will match the intensity of the light at the top. Now if I were to go like this, you'd probably get a hot spot right in the side of the building, but again, I want to feather that light so that closer to the flash, the light that is more intense doesn't hit it so hard, and that we get a nice penetration of that light all the way up the side of the building. So there's a few reasons why I'm shooting this at sunset instead of sunrise. If I were to shoot this at sunrise, I'd be out here in the complete dark trying to fiddle around and find the right composition. And even though I scouted it, I still wanted plenty of time to find the exact composition because I knew things would change on the day. Another reason is that if I was going to shoot this at sunrise, I want some of the lights from the hotel to be on. I want people in their rooms. There's a much higher likelihood that people will be in their room around this time of day rather than at 4 or 5 in the morning just waking up. And lastly, I know this is a very complicated shot, so I might lose a little bit of that sunrise light behind the hotel, but everyone's going to be alert, ready to go. Adam's going to be able to run around. We're not going to be exhausted and completely out of it. All right, so my goal here isn't to light up the entire building and flatten it out. I really only want to light up that center part where there's a bit of activity, there's already some glow starting to come from it. If I lit the whole building, since we're so far away, I think we'd lose any geometry that we had and flatten the whole thing out. I want to keep some depth in the building. So like I said, I'm only gonna light that right-hand side away from that sloping arrowhead at the tip. All right, so even though it looks like it's rather bright through those cameras, they're shooting about ISO 3200, it's actually really dark out here. I'm at a 4-second exposure, f8, ISO 200. We're getting to the point where I'm gonna have Adam start adding some light. We're also gonna go ahead and add a video light so you can see what we're doing.
I think I'm where you want me to be. Let's give it a shot.
All right, aim it towards the very top of the building. Ready? 3, 2, 1. And we have flash. Look at that. That looks beautiful. I want you to go away from the arrowhead down to that first row of windows on the shaft of the building.
I am at the first row of windows on this shaft.
All right, I'm gonna have you fire in 3, 2, 1. Boom, nailed it. All right, that looked perfect. I'm gonna have you go to the next row of windows and let me know when you're ready.
I am ready, go ahead.
All right, 3, 2, 1. That looked beautiful. On to the next one.
In position and ready.
3, 2, 1. If you're gonna try something crazy like this, one thing important to remember is to pick a shutter speed that's long enough. Like if I was at 1/15 of a second and I was like 3, 2, 1, do it now, there'd be no hope of ever happening. So I've got a 2 or 3 second shutter speed. I'm actually at 2.5 seconds right now. So when I say 3, 2, 1, go, he's got plenty of time to get that flash pop in. Before you go any further, I want to have you try and put some light on the arrowhead. So we'll see what it looks like. It might flatten the whole thing out, but if you don't mind running back in front of the arrowhead, and we're going to try lighting that. As Adam's running back with the light, I'm just bracketing some non-lit frames so that maybe when I'm using Photoshop, I will use some of these brighter exposures to kind of shape my base exposure. All right, aim it at the very top, and 3, 2, 1, fire. That was perfect. I use an assistant pretty much all the time now whenever I'm shooting, but when I started out, I really worked on my own a lot, so I'd be running back and forth with the camera. And it worked, but for something of this scale, it would be completely impossible and out of the question to do this without an assistant. All right, as it's getting darker, I'm opening up my aperture more and more and more to get some more ambient light. So at this point, I'm at 5.6 ISO 400, 4 seconds, and I'm gonna have Adam go ahead and light this, so let's see if we get it. All right, 3, 2, 1, fire. You got it. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to keep bracketing and make sure I have a complete wide range of exposures to work with in Photoshop. So now I'm up to a 30-second exposure, f8, ISO 200. It's really dark out here. And I mean, it only took us, what, 15 minutes to light that whole hotel? We were pretty quick and efficient, and it seems like an insurmountable task, but I think I've done these so many times now, it's almost routine. I knew we could nail it. I'm really psyched with how it came out. Adam was almost perfect. The walkie-talkies worked great, and everything went very well. So we got here about 3 or 4 hours ago. We found the perfect location. We waited for sunset. After sunset, we got some amazing clouds and scenery, and then once it got dark enough, we added a little bit of flash. I think we got a really cool picture here. We got tons of pieces to put together, so let's jump into Photoshop and see what we can get. Now you just saw us light paint this huge building from about a mile away, and I've gone through and as usual just culled. This was a relatively simple cull. All I really did here was pull out a couple frames that I liked. If you zoom in here, you can see our little flash pops all along the edge of the building, and it's really subtle. It's kind of a small effect, but if you go all the way to the end, when it's dark enough to actually get light on that, the building is just overwhelmed with the floodlights of the hotel. So we got in there before those floodlights really kicked on and added our own sort of pretty light to make our own photo, which I think is gonna show off this property much better than a photo with the property's own floodlights on, which in my opinion were just way too bright. So we're gonna finesse that a little bit and pull a nice photo out of here. One thing I do wanna mention is that I'm looking at these and I shot these super dark. It might be a little bit noisier than I'm comfortable with, honestly. I'm gonna have to brighten these up significantly, but again, that's why we're using Lightroom. We can pull the most data out of these files possible. And I'm lucky that these are underexposed rather than overexposed, because it's pretty amazing how far you can pull the shadows up. So before we go into Photoshop, let's do some quick adjustments here. And I think, I'm guessing here, I'm thinking this needs to come up by like a stop. So this was the before. It's just almost flat and completely dark. I'm gonna bring all these photos up significantly. Again, I wanna make sure that nothing is really blown out. So I'll just do a quick highlight check there. But again, I want that flash pop to actually be visible rather than sunken into a field of black like they are with these unedited photos. So I'll just go ahead and pull the exposure up here. I think what happened was it was so dark and we were so far away that the iPad brightness kind of messed with me, and that is something you do have to keep an eye on. Even though I had that iPad way down low brightness-wise, it was still showing me a much brighter image than the camera was actually making. So this is pretty simple. Again, just bringing up the exposure, down the highlights as I see fit. I think that'll be fine. So I'll go ahead and apply that to all the rest of these images here. And with that, we're going to jump into Photoshop. We're going to go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack, navigate to this lesson folder, go ahead and open up our 12 images, and click OK. Alright, so once we have Photoshop open, we'll go ahead and turn off all of our layers, except for number 12, that's our base layer. I do have 11 in here, which is like a more blurry version of the water. Also has some lights turned on back there if we want to blend those in later. You can turn these on and off, and you can see we really don't have any interior glow from that hotel, so might want to use 11 for some blurrier water, some lights in the hotel. Number 10, again, I might want to flip on some of those interior lights. I may use this to do so. But for the most part, this is going to be a pretty standard blend here. So I'm going to group layers 9 through 1 together. I'm going to call those flash pops just to stay organized. And really quick, you know the drill. I'm going to go through and composite these together. So Alt-click, add a black layer mask, set the blend mode to lighten, and paint in those flash pops. And one neat little unintended side effect here is that as I paint in lighten blend mode, a lot of those lights in the hotel sort of come on. And the problem with trying to get this all in one shot is that those floodlights are just so bright. And by the time it would be dark enough to get a nice sort of twilight exposure on the hotel, those lights would have overwhelmed our scene. So that's why we're kind of using our flash here to beat those floodlights, to beat the intensity of them, so that we are much better able to control the lighting on the scene. Number 6, Alt-click, got a black layer mask filled with black and lighten. Looks like this layer here, layer 5, is sort of giving us like a funky color cast or something. Let's drag it up and see what's going on. Yeah, so this gives a weird color cast on the left, but it does give me some interior glow there. So I'm just going to brush out the flash pop area. And I'm going to brush in some of those interior lights. There we go. All right, that's looking good. Now, if I want to bring out those flash pops a little more to make this a little more dramatic, what I could do is add a curves layer to the base here. And I'm just going to darken everything around the hotel. And since we're under all those flash pops, everything is going to get significantly brighter in terms of light. But you can see I did bleed out a little bit too far, so I'm going to add a mask here. And I'm just going to clean up some of that excess brightness on top of the hotel. There we go. So something like that, so it blends together a bit more naturally. Okay, so there's our flash pops, and this is still looking very flat, so we're going to do some work on this, don't worry. Let's go ahead and take our layer number 10 here. I'm going to set the blend mode to lighten on this, and as you can see, the color cast just gets out of control. But on the interior here, we do get some lights to turn on. So I'm going to Alt-click, add a black layer mask, take a brush, 30% or so opacity, and just bring back some of these interior lights. I don't want any of the light on the side of the building there. And this area here is super bright. So I'm going to make a new layer on top, call it clone, and just going to grab that area to the right because this is a repeating pattern. That should be an easy clone for us right there, just to kind of tame that window. All right. So something like that's looking pretty good. And I might want to do the same for this window down here. We'll grab this guy. Okay, that's looking good. Now I want to make this a somewhat interesting, not super flat photo, so we're going to do some curves moves and some color adjustments here and try to bring out some color and drama in this shot. Now unfortunately, what happened is these clouds rolled in, and to replace the sky would be an utter nightmare between finding the horizon line and using the ridge line in the mountains and blending it with the clouds. We could do it, but I'd rather just, I do like the clouds. I do think it adds some nice atmosphere. So I don't want to replace it wholesale. I just want to bring out the best in it. So let's see what we can do for that. First of all, I want to give this sunset some color. It's like a very flat blue. So I'm going to go and add a curves adjustment layer. And I'm going to take out some of this blue and make it not feel so cold. I feel like this should feel like more of like an islandy tropical sunset, and that cold blue, which might work in somewhere like Norway or something, doesn't really fit here. So I'm going to suck out the blues, and I'm going to add a significant amount of red here to kind of make this feel a little more tropical. A little warmer, really, is what I'm going for. Something like that. Let's see what the blend mode is that I want to settle on here. I could go for color. I could leave it. I could try overlay. That's a little too intense. But normal. Normal is actually pretty good. It's still pretty flat, but we can work on that here in a second. So I've sucked out some of those cold blues, added some warmth. I think unfortunately it's a little too orangey on the building, so I'm going to take my brush here at like 50% opacity, and I just want to paint out some of that warmth, but not all of it, on that building. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give these midtones a nice bump here, and we might run into a little bit of limitation on our JPEG files because these have been exported to Lightroom at not 100% quality. They're not lossless TIFFs or anything. We're going to do something. I'm going to push this pretty hard, so you might see some graininess, but if you're working on like your own high quality files, it should not happen to you. What we're going to do is we're going to create a luminosity mask using our RGB channel here. So if you go ahead and command click on the RGB channel thumbnail, you'll get that little dotted marching ant icon over your hand. Go ahead and click on that. What that's going to do is create a mask based on the luminosity values of this photograph. You can see some of this selection has formed. Go ahead and click the Save Selection as Channel, and what you're going to get is this Alpha 1 channel down here. If we think about this as a visual representation of a mask, all these darks are going to hide any adjustments we make on this mask, and all of the lights are going to reveal. So where there's this middle gray, it's like our midtones, and this image, if I look at the midtones, it feels pretty flat, and I know it could use a lot of punch. So I'm going to take this Alpha 1 mask here. I'm going to, if you don't have the selection activated, go ahead and hold Command or Control and click on it, and that's going to give you this activated selection here. Let's go back and turn on all of our RGB channels here, and go back to the Layers panel. And while I still have these marching ants, this selection made from that channel mask, I'm going to add a new curves layer. And I'll alt-click on this so you guys can see I have that same mask from the channels panel applied to this curves layer. And what this is going to do, when I start messing with the curves here, this is really going to punch up those mids. So if I add contrast, you'll see what happens is that the midtones in this, all those sort of dull, lifeless, flat colors start to come to life. Now, the effect is a little bit too pronounced on the hotel itself. I think it's a little too crazy down there, but we've avoided messing with our shadows. The contrast isn't adding to the shadows. We're not crunching those blacks, but we are adding a ton of life to the sky. Again, look how flat all those midtones are before I sort of punch it up with this contrast. So I'm going to go on this mask here. I can alt-click and I'm just going to take a soft brush here, set the foreground color to black, and I'm going to paint out that mask around our hotel. All right, now we can go back and turn it on, and you can see now that layer hasn't affected the hotel. The contrast there remains the same. Our light painting is unaffected, and if you want to brush some of that in, feel free. But for the most part, I like the effect that our lighting did on the building, and I like the effect, oh, that's just so much better. Like, look at the difference in contrast here. And of course, if we zoom in, you will see some grain, but again, we're working on like marginal quality JPEGs here, so that is to be expected. So we've painted out that mid-contrast on the hotel itself. Now, you can take it a step further, and you can keep adding curves to it. You can take that same selection, if I go back to the channels panel, and you can get funky with it. You can activate it again. You can mess with the hue and the saturation and the vibrance, like whatever you want to do. These luminosity masks are just incredibly powerful and will really help to add a bit of punch to your images. So again, I turn that on and off, and the difference to me is just amazing. It's like this flat, featureless sky turned into something that has some serious kick to it. So, all right, I'm pretty happy with this. I might want to, I kind of like the blurriness of this water here. I'm looking at my layer 11 down here. If I wanted to add that in, again, this is going to be similar to my light painting. I'm going to alt-click with the black layer mask, and I'll take a brush at 50% opacity, and I can just start painting in some of that blurry water. That's kind of a cool effect, kind of like an ethereal, blurry feel to it. But I do like some of this wave action over here, so we can paint it out there perhaps. So again, I'll let you guys decide what you want to do for that one. But I do like that blurry, streaky water. Kind of gives it a very interesting long exposure feel with the clouds. You can even adjust the opacity of the entire layer to get it where you want it. But I think that's pretty neat. All right, so we have a really cool, soft, inviting scene here. If I group everything together, I can show you like how far we've come from that original flat image. Let's go ahead and finish this guy off, shall we? So I'm going to add a little vignette here around the edges, and I definitely think I want to crop to something like 16 by 9. So I'm going to drag out an imaginary ruler here. There's a bit too much water in the foreground. So with that ruler in mind, that's kind of where I'm going to want to bring my vignette up to. Something like that. Again, to kind of focus and emphasize that hotel. Okay, now we can go in, and if there's anything we need to edit out, like these chairs, for example, I can go back down to our clone layer. I can just zap those really quickly. Okay. All right, so for the most part, I think our image is done. I'm going to Command-Alt-Shift-E to flatten all to a new layer. And drag out some ruler lines to make sure that we are nice and level here. Looks like we're pretty good. Yeah. Our water looks nice and flat. Horizon isn't crooked or anything. So I think we're done here. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I think this is going to be bigger than 2 gigabytes, so I'm going to make sure I save it as Photoshop PSB. as in Photoshop big, large document format here. And before I deliver this, I think I'll take it into Lightroom and do a quick pass of noise reduction and maybe some very, very light edits in Lightroom. But for the most part, I think this is looking really good. And we came a long, long way from our original super flat Twilight shot. Even though I'm not totally in love with the composition, I think it would be a great shot for the hotel, for like a hotel landing page or something. And I love the mood that we were able to pull out of it. So just by using some really interesting kind of curves moves there and boosting those mids with the luminosity mask, we came a long way from making the shot a completely flat failure into something that I think is pretty usable. Sets a good mood, a nice warm feeling. So with that, let's go back on location and work on our next shot.